Rohan always believed time was generous, not because anyone told him so, but because his life had never proven otherwise. And when life keeps letting you delay things without immediate punishment, you start assuming the bill will never arrive. He woke up late most days, telling himself that mornings were overrated, that productivity could start at noon just as easily as at sunrise, and that the world was too obsessed with urgency, while he was simply living calmly, though deep down even he knew that calm was just a softer word he used for avoidance. Rohan had plans, big ones, impressive ones, plans that sounded powerful when spoken aloud, but plans that never moved beyond notebooks, saved drafts, and conversations that began with one day, because one day felt safe, and today felt demanding. He wanted to learn new skills, to build something meaningful, to take care of his parents better, to become someone he would respect, but every intention came with an unspoken condition. Later, after this phase, after this distraction, after this mood passed, after life felt more convenient. And life, of course, never felt convenient. His father used to watch him from the corner of the room in the evenings, not with anger, not even with disappointment, but with a quiet curiosity that asked a dangerous question: how long can someone wait before their waiting becomes their life? Time doesn't repeat itself, his father once said while fixing an old clock that no longer worked properly. Rohan smiled politely, nodded, and returned to his phone, because wisdom that requires action is easy to ignore when entertainment requires nothing. Days passed the way they always had, smoothly, comfortably, forgettably, and Rohan mistook the absence of crisis for progress, not realizing that stagnation often looks like peace until you measure how far you haven't moved. He postponed calls, delayed decisions, ignored opportunities, and treated his potential like an unlimited resource, assuming it would still be there whenever he finally felt ready enough, confident enough, motivated enough. Then one morning, something small but irreversible happened. His father collapsed while tying his shoes. Not dramatically, not with warning, not with time for final words or life lessons, just a sudden moment where time proved it was not negotiable. The hospital room was quiet in a way Rohan had never experienced before, a silence that didn't invite scrolling, didn't allow distraction, and didn't care whether he was ready to face it or not. The doctor spoke gently, using careful words, but the meaning was brutal and simple. They had waited too long. Too long to check. Too long to slow down. Too long to notice the signs. And for the first time in his life, Rohan understood that waiting does not pause consequences, it only delays awareness. After the funeral, the house felt larger and emptier at the same time, every room echoing with things unsaid and moments postponed, and Rohan found himself sitting alone with the broken clock his father never fixed, its hands frozen at a time that would never return. He tried to distract himself at first, because grief, like truth, is easier to avoid than to process, but avoidance has a way of failing when reality becomes persistent. One evening, while sorting through his father's old drawers, Rohan found a small notebook, worn and yellowed, filled not with achievements or regrets, but with dates, simple dates each followed by a short sentence. Thought of starting my own business today. Planned to take Rohan on a trip. Wanted to learn the guitar. Decided to do it next year. Page after page, the same pattern repeated, intention followed by delay, desire followed by postponement, life followed by later. Rohan's chest tightened as he realized something painful and terrifying, that his father, the man who warned him about time, had struggled with the same illusion. The difference was that his father had run out of time quietly, while Rohan was still wasting his loudly. That night, Rohan didn't sleep, not because of grief alone, but because he could no longer escape a question that refused to leave him alone. If time were suddenly taken away from me, what would I be proud I didn't postpone? The answer was uncomfortable. There were too many empty spaces. Too many almosts. Too many I'll start tomorrow moments stacked on top of each other until they formed a life that looked full from the outside but felt hollow when examined closely. Rohan realized that time is not lost in dramatic moments but in small, forgettable choices, choosing comfort over effort, distraction over discipline, ease over growth, and that every wasted hour doesn't announce itself as wasted, it disguises itself as rest, entertainment, or deserved break. The next morning, Rohan woke up earlier than usual, not because he suddenly became disciplined, but because something inside him finally felt heavier than laziness: awareness. He didn't promise himself a perfect life, a transformed personality, or overnight success, because he had learned that grand promises are just another form of delay, but he did promise one thing: to stop treating time as something he owned and start treating it as something he borrowed. He started small, painfully small, in ways that felt almost embarrassing to someone who once dreamed big, reading 10 pages instead of scrolling endlessly, making one uncomfortable phone call instead of avoiding all of them, learning for 30 minutes instead of waiting for a free day that would never arrive. Some days he failed. Some days he slipped back. But something had changed permanently. He no longer lied to himself about it. When he wasted time now, he felt it, fully and honestly, without excuses, and strangely, that discomfort became more motivating than any inspirational quote ever had. Months passed, and Rohan didn't become famous, rich, or extraordinary overnight, but his days began to feel heavier in a good way, as if each hour now carried weight instead of dissolving into forgetfulness. He repaired the old clock, not because it mattered whether it worked, but because it reminded him of something simple and unforgiving: time moves whether you respect it or not. One evening, Rohan stood by the window, watching the city rush forward without waiting for anyone, and he understood the lesson his father never got the chance to fully live by. Time is not cruel, but it is honest. It does not punish you immediately, which is why people underestimate it, but it records everything: the effort you avoided, the courage you delayed, the life you postponed, and eventually presents the total without explanation or sympathy. Rohan finally accepted that wasting time is not about being lazy, it is about being afraid of failing, afraid of starting imperfectly, afraid of discovering that the dream you delayed your whole life may not turn out the way you imagined. But he also learned something equally important: starting late is painful, but not starting at all is permanent. And so, every day now, before sleep, Rohan asks himself one simple question: not to judge, not to punish, but to stay awake. Did I use today, or did I just survive it? Because surviving consumes time, but living respects it. You don't waste time in one day. You waste it slowly, politely, comfortably. Time doesn't shout when it's leaving. It leaves quietly, while you are busy saying later.